might be sat on a sweaty train or in a crumbling Victorian hovel. But for the next insert number of minutes, please, we'll be taking you back to nature. Because in each episode, we'll rip up the podcast rulebook and kidnap, well, lead, a different guest to their favourite local park. And there we'll talk about the things that they like to do. So pack a picnic blanket. Try saying that after a few Prosecco's. Our guarantee to you, lucky listener, is that this episode will contain one or more of the following: ice cream, swings, grass, dog walkers, drunks, canoodling couples, a possible mugging, and fun in the sun, unless it rains. So join me, Christopher Beanland, yes, that is my real name, and a special guest as we try to create the perfect park date. Calthorpe Park in Birmingham. You can hear the leaves crunching under my feet. They're scorched by the summer heat. It's the opening day of the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. Everyone here is very excited. I saw some giant puppets in Victoria Square. Tonight the games are going to kick off. Will the opening ceremony be as exciting and memorable as the London 2012 opening ceremony? Well, by the time you listen to this, you'll know. Will it have been a damp squib or a roaring success? I'm not going to that event though. We're in competition with that tonight. I am going to a screening of the Michael Cummins and Stuart Lee film King Rocker, and then interviewing Stuart Lee after. Me and David Baldwin will be doing a podcast as well, whether he likes it or not. Another thing I wanted to do while I was here is to introduce Ben Norris, who is the star of the episode of Park Date that you're about to hear. Poet, actor, playwright, a true gentleman, very funny, very cool, and you're going to enjoy hearing him talk about how they make the noises that sound like a lamb giving birth in the Archers, which is recorded just up the road at BBC Birmingham and has been for millennia. Ben Norris also attended university here in Birmingham, and we talked about Birmingham and how much we both like the city. You know by now that I'm a person who spent a few years living here in Birmingham and wrote a novel based in Birmingham as well, though they didn't ask me to attend the opening ceremony tonight to recreate sections of The Wall in the Head. Anyway, enjoy this chat with Ben Norris. Ben's play Autopilot sounds incredible. If we can get everything ready in time, we'll have this up while it's still running at Edinburgh Festival, so do check it out. Autopilot, I'm sure it will be touring after that as well. As always, if you're enjoying Park Date, please do subscribe so the podcast automatically appears in your feed, and please leave a review and name check some trees. Lots of car noise now, it's rush hour. I'm going to meet Stuart Lee. Enjoy this episode of Park Date. That's it, that's the end. I know I'm still talking, but anyway, it's over now. Yeah. It's over now. No, really. This is the... Just shut up, Chris. Shut up. Okay, bye. Welcome to Beauvoir Square. I'm here with Ben Norris, or maybe we should say Ben Norris.
Thank you. Yes, please, if you wouldn't mind.
We're going to experiment with pronunciation. Ben, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me.
you've had a meeting. You've come down from Seven Sisters into the beautiful, sunny. Well, not sunny today.
Sunny adjacent.
Exactly. Yeah, it's cloudy. Yeah, we're here in the Beauvoir Square. I actually quite like this square. We've got these kind of like Dutch houses round the edge, very nicely maintained rose bushes. It's quite fancy.
It's lovely. It's like just off of the Kingsland Road, so it's quite quiet, quite secluded. It's very peaceful. You can hear the wind in the trees. The grass is suffering a little bit because of the heat wave.
It's parched.
Where isn't? It's a bit thirsty.
Like me.
Yeah. Aren't we all? But yeah, it's really nice. There's kids playing. There's a nice kind of, but it's still the working day, so it's not like packed. I don't know. I'm a big fan. I've never been here before.
Oh right.
My first time.
First time. Well, let's take a stroll around. I'll show you around. It won't take very long because it's very tiny, to be honest. I've done some of these in, Hampstead Heath or something. You have a very long walk, but
get lost.
Yeah, it feels a bit strange doing one in a very small park. Where you're just walking around in a little circle, but. Let's have a look anyway. There's a little house here. I don't think anyone lives here. It's
house is a generous way of
What were you going to call it?
I thought it might even be a public toilet.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like the old groundskeeper's cottage.
I think it probably is. Yeah. Keep this. Let me have a look around the back. Maybe keep the spades and all that kind of thing.
Got some quite new-looking bike locks around here.
Well, there's a new bike. This is my bike, which is very old and knackered. But that one is very fancy, isn't it? Some kind of electric.
Yeah, like electric child transporter.
Yeah,
it's very. If Batman had twins and got a bike, it would be that bike.
Batman has had kids.
Yeah.
Moved to Dalston.
Settled down, but still very married to his aesthetic. That's what that is.
It actually does look a lot like that, doesn't it? I have to take a photo before we go.
Yeah.
On the do you know what? Well, let's talk about this now. On the subject of, when we talk about park keepers and spades and stuff, for your role in the Archers, did you have to
Very nice segue. Very nice.
It just occurred to me, did you have to learn about farming?
A bit.
Did you have to read a book? How do you farm?
Not necessarily.
You didn't go full De Niro like method acting.
Well, more because reading a book would be useful, but in terms of like what it needs to sound like is that you've got it in your body and that like you know your way around certain activities.
Yeah.
So it's more like watching videos or even sometimes doing certain tasks.
Right.
And knowing like the amount of exertion that something takes. Like if you're baling hay or you're lambing or whatever.
Right.
Like what does that
talk us through
require?
What both of those things mean?
Well, I mentioned baling hay just because I was listening on the way here. I was catching up on the old omnibuses.
You said, yeah.
And
was there some hay baling going on?
There was some intense hay baling going on.
Is that when you roll the hay into a kind of like a Swiss roll thing?
Now I should admit straight up, I don't know
I
because
don't know
my family's farm is a dairy farm. So I've never.
Got a farming background?
I've never. No. My Archer's family.
Oh, you're
farm
right. I was like, hold on, in real life.
No. I've just taken great ownership over Ben there and said mine.
Yeah.
But no, the Archer, particular Archer clan to which Ben, I should say, it doesn't help that we have the same name either. To which Ben Archer belongs is a dairy farm.
Yes.
So I've never had to bale any hay in the show.
You just have to milk
So I think it's where they just turn the hay into bales of hay. But it's very physically, it's very taxing. Yeah. And then you stack them on the trailer and then they take them off. But in terms of lambing and, obviously we use various different tricks to make it sound like the actual thing is happening. We have some fantastic spot SMs in the studio who make all sorts of contraptions do certain things to give the impression that a lamb is being born or whatever.
So lambing is when the lamb is born?
Yes, so you're helping the ewe give birth. And in our particular case, that will be a tea towel filled with yoghurt dropped onto some old cassette tape on the floor.
Hold on,
sounds this like hay.
This sounds like Barbarian Sound Studio.
Yeah, it's closer than you'd think.
Archer's version.
So it's I guess that it's maybe this is a little bit too explicit, but sort of the moist sound of birth, and then like the weight of a lamb falling onto straw.
That's fantastic.
Beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But the other one for me was sheepdog calls because I have a sheepdog in the show. So learning.
What's your dog? What's its name?
Bess.
Bess.
Yeah.
Border collie.
Yes. And So learning the difference between the way that people who have kind of normal dogs, quote unquote, would talk to their dogs or whistle for their dogs versus how a shepherd would talk to their sheepdog. Because the first time I had a scene like that, I started doing something and they were like, absolutely not that. So I went away and swiftly listened to some YouTube, watched a couple of like world championship shepherding videos and stuff to see how the pros do it.
Now I'm reminded of when I was young, I don't know if it exists anymore, there was a show called One Man and His Dog, which was on BBC One on Sunday, and it featured Yorkshire men of a certain age whistling for their sheepdog, and sheepdog would round up the sheep. The command was always "come by."
Yeah.
It was here to go, "come by."
I think I may have watched a couple of those clips in my extensive research period as well. It's really wholesome, isn't it? It's a very calming thing to spend time with.
It is.
Content like that.
Oh, completely. It's reminding me of my Yorkshire upbringing. I only lived there when I was little, but yeah, the sheep on the hills and all that kind of rural life is. Obviously, it has. Well, and I think in the Archers they've kind of addressed actually some of the darker realities, right, of rural life. It's not this kind of idyll that we imagine, but at the same time, it is calmer than living in a city. And
yeah, everything happens at a different pace.
It's slower, isn't it? And yeah, people can be quite friendly, and it's quite nice. I imagine that's. Quite a good gig to have, right?
It's a lovely gig to have. I wish we got to actually do it in the countryside. Yeah. I love Birmingham. We were just talking before.
Exactly, we were talking about Birmingham, weren't
and how
we?
much we both love it. But in terms of getting out of the city for a bit, it would be great if we got to go and do any kind of recording on location. But no, I really, really enjoy it. It's a lovely family to be a part of, and it's great as an actor to have something that kind of is a bit regular, or semi-regular, and I love that. I love kind of aging with the character and the idea that you look at some of the stalwarts of the cast and
they've been doing it for years, haven't they?
Yeah. If I got to still be in the show when I'm in my 70s, how amazing is that to go on such a journey with someone? So yeah, it's great. It's great company to be in, and I feel very lucky. Yeah,
that's brilliant. What's the longest time that someone's been in the Archers? It's a very long time, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, June Spencer is 103 years old.
Yeah.
And still in the show.
Yeah.
And she was in the first episode.
Wow.
In 1951.
That's incredible.
So, I'm pretty sure no one will ever beat that.
Yeah.
She plays Peggy Woolley, and she's just. Well, she's a machine, isn't she? Let's be honest. Like, wow, 103, and she's still working.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
And the actor that plays my gran, Paddy Green, she's amazing as well. Another really long-standing, and I had a bit more to do with her when I joined because Ben and Peggy don't really ever talk that much, but because Jill's Ben's gran, we had a lot of scenes together. She was a big part of making me feel really welcome, and ditto the actors that play my parents. Like, everyone was so friendly, and it was, I'm hugely grateful for that kind of, because they know that it can be a bit daunting, I suppose, for like a younger actor to become part of, it's an institution really, isn't it? So so I owe them all a lot, and I'm very lucky, as I said. It's nice. It's very familial. I think you do start to see them as kind of extended family like figures.
Yeah, that must be a nice thing to do. And you make that in Birmingham. We were talking. You went to university in Birmingham. I lived in Birmingham for a bit as well. There's a quite interesting kind of creative scene going on that people don't necessarily know about. And Ben, you're a poet as well, and you were saying to me that you kind of cut your teeth almost, didn't you, in Birmingham doing your poetry and doing readings and going to events and things there. Maybe talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, Birmingham really lit that fire for me. I'd had a kind of, I suppose, a secret interest in poetry before that, because it's not very cool and not very encouraged
it's the
socially among like young men, at least. So.
First thing I ever had published was a poem.
No way.
Before journalism or any kind of creative writing, it was poetry, and I loved poetry. But
you're talking in the past tense, and that's worrying me. What's happened?
I don't write poetry anymore. No.
Do you read it?
I read it, but right. I don't write it anymore. But I still love poetry. But yeah, what was kind of the thing that drew you to poetry?
I think the how helpful it is to explore moments or feelings or things that you're struggling with in the first instance. That's what drew me to it, and then after that it was as much the community as it was the actual art form itself. Birmingham Uni had a really fantastic, artistic scene in general, loads of brilliant drama societies, and that was a big part of getting me back into that, but also a really amazing creative writing society. So there's a great student scene, and then we all kind of struck out into the city centre and tried to make connections with the poetry nights that were happening there, and not just to be in our student-y bubble. And that was a huge part of launching me on the sort of poetry journey, I suppose, if that's not too grand a thing to say. Like doing poetry slams. They still are big, but like they were really having a moment then, I think. And I got my first paid gig while I was at uni still, and just the idea of being, you're gonna pay me money to read some poems. That's mad. That's amazing. And you're gonna pay for me to get a train somewhere, and just really blew my tiny mind, and it was great. And I've still got lots of friends in the city as a result of that, because I think what's sad about uni, what's both sad and magical about uni sometimes, is that like you can make brilliant friends, and the time that you have there and the friends that you have there, and the culture is very finite, because it ends when
everyone goes away,
everyone leaves. And I think the thing that I'm really grateful for, although I didn't clock that this was what was happening at the time, is that I put down a few more. I don't live there anymore. I could live there again for sure. I love it there, but I sort of inadvertently put down some slightly deeper roots as a result of just trying to dive into these communities that were not just student communities. And when I go back now, if I have some spare time around recording Archer's stuff, I'll go and have dinner with a friend, or I'll try and go to a poetry night or something like that, and I love that. It makes me feel like I'm not just like a travelling salesman staying in an anonymous hotel and not knowing anybody, which sometimes this job can feel like.
Yes, I can imagine. What's the best venue to go and listen to poetry in Birmingham at the moment? Where would you go?
Well, the one that will always have the specialist place in my heart, although the night isn't there anymore, but is the Victoria pub, which is where Hit the Ode was when I was there. Hit the Ode now is at the Hippodrome, and the Hippodrome is doing awesome work to support grassroots art scenes, not just poetry but dance and all sorts.
Is the Victoria the one that's next to the Hippodrome? Is it that one?
It's just down from the Alexandra.
It's the Alexandra, sorry, of course.
So it's on the corner.
Yeah.
And back in the day, that's where we would go and Hit the Ode. This great night, still runs. Back then, it had a really cool theme, which was it would have one local headliner, one sort of national headliner, and one international headliner. Which for poetry nights, like very logistically ambitious to sort of be flying people in. I think they would try and tie it in with if this person was already going to be in Europe or the UK doing a tour or whatever. But they'd get some pretty big names from international spoken word, and that was hugely inspiring. And now that night happens at the Hippodrome.
What kind of people did they book? Can you remember any ones that you were very taken by?
Well, I can remember the first one I ever went to that was the thing that I left and went, I want to be a poet, very concretely, was Vanessa Kasule, Ken Arkind, John Sands, and sadly now deceased Birmingham poet called Paul Murphy, who was a musician and a spoken word artist, and it's one of those things where, like, it's, they were always great, but sometimes they were like it worked better on some nights than others, and sometimes this alchemical wonder occurred whereby just the performance, who mostly had never, I think Ken and John knew each other. They were both from the States. I think they were touring together, but Vanessa, Paul, Ken and John, no previous gigs together, no connection, just and the open micers as well. Something happens in the room where you're like, this is a special night. And I think I actually like set up a WordPress when I got home that night, like Ben Norris poet.wordpress. Like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it, and I had such hunger after that. It was really, really inspiring.
Yeah, it's incredible when you feel that feeling, and it makes you think, actually, that's what I want to do
when you get inspired, it's incredible, and that's how creativity kind of spreads, isn't it? You see someone you love. I love the idea of fandom, right? Like the idea that you see people and they inspire you, and then who knows, maybe you'll inspire someone else, and it's kind of, yeah, it's sort of like passing it on, isn't it?
Yeah, and it reminds you to care still. I think it's easy if you're stressed and tired, whatever. You're like, you don't know if someone in the audience is coming to the thing for the first time. You don't know, they could leave like with their whole life trajectory altered in some way, or just they've been given this tool, this outlet to express themselves that they perhaps didn't know about, and it hugely changes their experience of being alive. And that's like massive. So
it's a fundamental
great
thing,
to try
isn't
and keep
it?
that in mind.
And I think, but people don't realise, Birmingham has this literary scene. We talked a little bit about Catherine O'Flynn, didn't we? Who we both like, Jonathan Coe and Claire Morrell. There's lots of writers who've come from Birmingham or written about Birmingham. There's lots of kind of literary talent there, and people doing interesting things.
And people who taught me, like Luke Kennard and Bogdan Piasecki, like Benjamin Zephaniah, famously back in the day,
of course.
And the Birmingham Literature Festival was amazing. Writing West Midlands as an organisation, like great at supporting people at all different stages of their career. I've loved it, and there's a canal laureate as well, which is not specific to Birmingham. It's
every canal,
a national. Yeah, every canal has its own laureate. Can you imagine the logistics? And they have to like battle each other at various like intersections,
various locks.
Yeah. Who's going to rule this particular stretch of canal for the next decade? But yeah, for a while that had Joe Bell was the inaugural. Canal and River Trust laureate, and then Luke did it for a bit, and so it because of Birmingham's rich waterways, I think that had a real
that's interesting
anchorage, if you'll forgive the pun, in the city. I hate myself for that one. So
that was going to sink
great.
You, Ben.
Oh wow. We've launched on a dangerous path here.
Dear. End it now.
Please.
So you've published poems as well. You've had you said pamphlets, didn't you? You've had poetry pamphlets, and you've written. How do you feel about the difference between writing and performing poetry? What's your feelings about how? Do you have a preference, or how do you feel about
the big question? A source of like much. Consternation within the poetry world, much of it like very avoidable as well. I think there was people like to characterize the kind of page versus stage.
I've never heard that before, a page versus stage.
Well, I'm glad you haven't, because we all got so bored of it.
Right.
It was, stereotypically speaking, it would be like page poets are really good writers, but they're really boring. And performance poets can't actually write, but they're very charismatic and they do lots of rhymes, and isn't that nice? And various gatekeepers of each respective world would be very disparaging about the other. Occasionally one of the newspapers would be like, is poetry dead? Or poetry's not dead, it's the new rock and roll, and we'd fluctuate between these two kind of exhausting and really reductive binary positions.
With a picture of Murray Luckland Young or something.
Or Kay Tempest, or that kind of thing. And at once people would be decrying the end and the beginning of poetry, or its rebirth, and actually it's a lot more amorphous than that, and that's where the best and most interesting stuff lies. I love both, and I there's a reason I do both. I think people sometimes say, if you had to pick writing or performing, I can't pick, otherwise I would have picked already, I think, and I would have concentrated my energies in that. But I love the relationship with an audience that you get in when you write something for publication. You're not there at the moment of when it's received, and I think getting that immediate feedback and being able to have that two-way relationship, like if something's funny or even if it's subtler than that, just something in the air, an exchange happens, and that's incredibly nourishing. And at the same time there's a kind of quiet interiority that comes with writing that I think is really necessary, and you're not necessarily reverse engineering something to get a laugh or to be impactful. You're just being very truthful about what a particular moment needs or a line needs, and I don't know, there's no answer really. It's something that I've thought a lot about, but
I think the way that's actually made me think quite a lot there, what you just said, Ben, because I think you put it really well. It's something I've thought about. As a writer, I've come very, very late to performing anything. I never did stand up. I never kind of did book talks or anything like that. I never did acting, and I sometimes think I should have done, but I guess I was kind of consumed by that writerly desire for everything to be perfect on the page, and also let's face it, I'm quite shit at performing. you need to be good at that. I think that's a skill that I've kind of got a little bit better at as I've got older and more confident. I mean, yeah, you must have had like the confidence to go up on stage and act and read when you were younger as well.
Yeah, I think I was a like exhausting attention seeker at school who like
that's the answer, isn't it?
Very poorly behaved, and then the drama teachers were like, "How about you take that?"
So he's like googling ADHD.
And going, well, yeah. So I know you want to be the centre of attention, and then maybe instead of like throwing bricks through windows and like getting chucked out of classes, why don't you be in a play instead? And I was like, oh, okay. So there's a way to carry on mucking around but get praised for it instead. Oh, great. I mean, I'm being deliberately disingenuous, but like that's sort of what happened.
Hold on, but we're both northern, aren't we? Well, you're from Nottingham, aren't you? You're from Nottingham. I'm from Yorkshire, and I think it's fair to say both of those places where we come from, anything that approaches performance or kind of tall poppy syndrome a little bit, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, totally.
The kind of like don't make a fuss kind of thing, which I feel, being surrounded by Southerners as we are in London, I don't think people have that in London. Everyone seems to me to be encouraged at an early age to go and perform.
I think it's about class as much as it is anything else. I think
that's right too.
Anyone who goes to a school where things are expected of them, where it's normal for people to go onto Oxbridge or to become an MP or the CEO of somewhere. I think it's like, do that. But at school, I don't know where you went to school, but I went to a kind of pretty bog standard Battery Farm comprehensive school.
Me too.
Like no one wants to stick their head above the parapet because it just makes you ripe for being taken down a peg or two.
Exactly.
But at the same time, then in like lots of working class culture, there's a great like storytelling tradition. There's a great comedic tradition. There's an expectation that people will be able to have, like, for want of a better word, banter and like good kind of repartee and
that's
be able
very
to like.
true,
and so
isn't
I think
it?
like
when you see people in the pub,
in the
pub,
kind
of repressed comedians.
Yeah, and like it all comes from kind of manual labour culture, I think, and people riffing off of each other all the time and ribbing each other, and I think you have to be able to do that to survive. And so if you're good at that, then it's maybe less frowned on that you. I don't know. This is not a theory that I've developed much beyond the last 45 seconds of us talking. But I think it's interesting to consider. Where, like, on the one hand, you don't want to be like, "Oh, look at me," but there's an expectation that you'll be able to do certain. I remember an interview with Beth Steele, the playwright who wrote Wonderland, which is about Nottingham miners, and someone said, "Oh, your dad was a miner, so you must have got your sense of humour from him." And she's like, "No, I'm just funny. I'm also funny." And like that kind of thing where it's part of a family, it's part of a culture. It's you grow up with that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Expected of you, and you get good at it, and you get sharp, you get defensive in a way.
Yeah, exactly. I remember loving D.H. Lawrence when we were in school. I always quite enjoyed his books, and I wondered how his kind of sensitivity would have gone down in that quite tough world of those kind of mining communities. But actually, there are like sparks of that, and it's just about kind of how you discover it. It's often teachers, isn't it, who help you to discover that. I feel like teachers are the real heroes of the piece. They kind of say to you, I can remember my teachers, very encouraging, my English teachers especially, encouraged me a lot and said, maybe you can write, and I don't know if you had the same thing, but I feel like teachers in those circumstances can actually be the sort of key that unlocks the door and gives you that maybe confidence that you wouldn't necessarily get from somewhere else, right?
100%. That's exactly what happened with me. The two drama teachers that I had initially, and then the English teachers once they'd seen drama, the drama department worked on me a bit and softened me up to the point where the English department went, okay, we can move in now. Right. And yeah, between them, they changed my life. Yeah. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that. Really changed the path that I was on, and I guess it's about permission, isn't it? It's about self-belief and it's about permission. I was just thinking when you're talking about D.H. Lawrence and imagining you kind of in the corner of the playground while there's a football match going on, just reading Lady Chatterley's Lover on your own. And actually there's sensitivity everywhere. People just need to be allowed to feel it or told that it's legitimate. And then you realise there's this whole universe inside you that you've not looked at before. And that's when I think I started writing poetry, because it feels like poetry is the language of the universe inside you, and theatre and acting maybe is the language of the universe that you live in, with the society that you live in with other people. I turn to poetry when there's like difficult things happening, I think, in me, in my soul. And drama is like about, obviously it's about people going through stuff too, but because you only have unless you give someone in a monologue, you only have the language that people actually use when they speak aloud. It's a good vehicle for exploring bigger societal moral questions, whatever it is, and poetry is the thing that I turn to when I'm feeling quiet and introspective, and I need to puzzle something through just in me. And I haven't written a poem in ages, because I've had more of a theatre head on, but I miss it, and I know that there's a big weight, you know, I fluctuate back and forth, and so when I don't write one for a while, I know that there's a big poetry moment approaching in my life again. What's that coming over the hill? Is it a monster? No, it's a sestina, you know, like, and it's coming for you.
Were you quoting the Automatic there?
I absolutely was.
Thank you. We need more of that in podcasts.
Do we?
Great. I remember that tune. Well, you mentioned theatre, of course. Obviously, your play, which is going to be on in Edinburgh, sounds fantastic. That's, I mean, you've been working on that for years, haven't you?
Too long.
Right. So this was supposed to be in 2020, wasn't it? And then COVID got in the way. How are you feeling about putting it on now? Do you think the time's passed? Cancel it? Forget about it?
What, cancel the time, as in it doesn't count?
No, just cancel the play.
Oh, absolutely. Just
cancel chuck it away. Chuck it away.
How stressed I am about it right now as we speak, like 1 week away from the first performance. Absolutely cancel it.
Very stressed.
But no, I hope I don't feel like that in a week when we're actually up and running. But yeah, no, it's a weird one. I started writing it in 2017, and it went through various drafts and redrafts, and then eventually got to a place where it was going to see the light of day 2020. That didn't happen. But then it's given me a chance to redraft it some more. And
so you've done some edits on it since 2020.
The most significant edits it's ever had, actually. Like it's changed quite a bit. Since then, I had a bit of an epiphany about who the characters were and what worlds they were both from, and I sort of swapped some things around that made it make a lot more sense to me. And I was like, oh, I can't believe I haven't seen that before. But maybe it took the kind of stopping of the world to distill. Do you know what I mean? That lots of people had lots of realizations, and when I went to do a redraft of it in February of 2021, I was like, why have I not spotted this before? It seemed like the obvious thing to do, but I think I needed a minute away from it, just being sad and drinking in the daytime in my pajamas, like we all were in various ways, and then coming back to it like with a fresher perspective. So I'm grateful for that time in a weird way.
But the narrative is still there. It's this idea of the self-driving car, and then these two characters who meet kind of because of that.
Very much so. It's the same kind of thematic world. I just was switching around. So basically, one of the characters is an engineer who eventually works for this self-driving car company. The other character is a freelance illustrator, artist, kind of left-wing activist. But one of them's from a more working-class background, crudely speaking. One of them's from more privilege. and it used to be the other way around, and it used to be what maybe is the obvious way around, but that was suddenly much less interesting to me, and I was like, oh yeah, no, that they used to meet and they used to be like, this is who I am, and they weren't lying. And actually, you know, the drama now is in a kind of a performance of who they are based on who the other person wants them to be. And then alongside that, the self-driving car kind of exists, I suppose, in and of itself, because I'm fascinated by the moral dilemma that sits at the heart of self-driving car design, but also as a metaphor for kind of how much agency we have in our own lives, particularly along kind of class and financial grounds, and who is answerable for what mistakes, you know, when things are getting decided far away from where the impact will be, literally or figuratively speaking. Kind of how do we reconcile that on an ethical level? And I came to it because I didn't know the answer. I think I'm really interested in writing about questions that I don't know the answer to. I think there's a lot of value in plays that have a question that they do know the answer to, if the gesture of the play is to convince you of that answer as well. But in this case, I was like, wow, I have no idea how I feel about this thing. And that felt like a fruitful place to write from. Casting my mind back to 600 BC when I first started working, it honestly feels it's wild. COVID has really distorted time. Well,
and that's interesting what you're saying about answers as well, because I bet 9 journalists out of 10 will ask you questions like, oh, how do you feel about a self-driving car? Is it a good idea? Is it the future? But are you kind of ambivalent maybe about those?
Yeah, they're difficult questions to ask. I'm like, just come and see the play.
Exactly.
It's sort of that was the jumping off point. Because I don't know. Because on paper they're a lot safer.
Have you been in any?
No. I mean, cars we have now have elements of automation, of course, but I've not been in a car where I've seen the steering wheel turn itself.
I went in one.
How was that for you?
It was really weird. It was in New York. In Brooklyn. They had a test, and it was like a van thing. So they had a driver who was just sat there doing nothing. But you could see the wheel moving and all these cameras and sensors. Very, very strange.
It's wild, isn't it?
Yeah,
because there's 4 stages of automated vehicle design, at which steadily get more more self-driving. How does it go? Hands off, feet off, eyes off, brain off. So the one you would have been in, I imagine, was just hands off, but was the driver still accelerating and braking?
No.
So hands off and feet off, but not eyes off and brain off, because the car at any point might make a noise and require the driver to take back over. Yeah. So they're very much. And then the next one is you can not be looking, but you still have to be switched on, and then brain off is fully you can be asleep. You just you might as well be on a plane or on a train or whatever, not as the driver. So so it's scary, I think, because we're used to being, if something goes wrong, we want somebody to blame, and I think that's the thing that we find hard about it. We think, okay, even if I crash, I know I've crashed and I'm in charge of this thing. And there's something romantic about cars, I think, as well, like going on a road trip, like the wind in your hair, even though there's this battered old machine that's terrible for the planet. I think people will find it really hard to uncouple themselves from what the car has meant, like as a cultural symbol.
I love Ballard, and he said the man in the car was the kind of defining image of the century. He wrote a lot about that, didn't he? Like Concrete Island and things like that.
Yeah, and I was on a plane recently and I watched Ford versus Ferrari.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed that.
Do you know what? Yeah, great, entertaining, blockbustery film. But how much we've sold the car as a lifestyle thing and as a symbol of aspirational, well, as everything, particularly in the States, but here too. I think it's so interesting, and the way that Elon Musk has positioned himself as like, yes, we're making self-driving cars, but they also are symbols of it doesn't rob you of like they're very masculine things, aren't they, Teslas, and like
you can't get in them. I got.
I've never tried.
I'm
not allowed.
I've had
invited.
one time I got an Uber and it was a Tesla and I couldn't get into it because the handles are kind of recessed. I was like, how do I?
Yeah, it's a little.
I looked so uncool.
It's his castle.
Yeah,
you had to be admitted.
How do I get into your car?
Yeah,
very embarrassing.
I would have been intimidated by that and just gone back to my
I
was
was
like a lime cycle somewhere and been like, this is more me. I don't know. It's funny, isn't it? So yes, I think I don't know the answer, and it intimidates me, and that's why I thought let's lean in towards that feeling of discomfort rather than away from it.
And I think asking those questions is really interesting. I love Black Mirror, and I think that there's questions in there about like what are the kind of moral implications of technology, which is, I guess, maybe something that you're considering as well, isn't it?
100%. I think that I'm not actually interested in the tech in and of itself. Otherwise, I'd be writing an article about the tech. I think it's got to always be about the human ramifications and how we deal with it as a species and how it affects us and our relationships. And the best episodes of Black Mirror are the ones that are all about people, really.
They are, aren't they? I think it's the love story ones, like Hang the DJ and San Junipero.
Nosedive is also brilliant because it's a Faustian tale of someone's whole life falling apart. It just happens to be set in this universe not wildly far from our own, where like it's all about ratings and technological kind of disempowerment. But like, I'm writing a short film that we're going to shoot in September, actually, which is finally, it's another pre-COVID thing that's finally happening, and that has similar kind of concerns. On the surface, it looks quite techie, borderline sci-fi, more so than Autopilot, but it's not really. It's about people and power and how that moves, and it just happens to be that the vehicle for that is a tech thing. In both of these cases, because I don't really think of myself as like a sci-fi or even sci-fi adjacent writer. It just happened to be these are the things that grabbed me and spoke to me, and I suppose I'm interested in modernity in like a wider sense. But just go where the impulse takes you. As it took shape, it became quite important to me to make it queer as well. So it's it doesn't have to be their queerness is not a plot point or a theme. I wanted it to be incidentally queer, because it's about a relationship. I just think that like having these universal stories that are told through relationships that weren't always considered universal or accessible to, I don't know, that felt very important to me, and now, of course, now it is queer. It has become a big part of its identity, and the way that their power and privilege moves around that too. It's been fascinating to kind of watch that take shape.
And do you think Hannah and Cassie have a good chemistry together? Are you very happy with them in those roles?
Absolutely. That's why they've been cast. They're great together. It's really beautiful to watch and very infectious. And that's, obviously I want people to leave having watched a play that they feel provoked by and they want to have big conversations about the themes, but I also want people to have had a really good time in the company of two brilliant actors and to have been beguiled by their chemistry and their humour, and just to have enjoyed, to have had a good night out, in the John McGrath sense, and also just literally to have had a good time. And they're really beautiful performers, and they're beautiful people, and they're great to spend time with. So that's what I hope people will take away as much as any big thematic things. Yeah,
it sounds fantastic. If I may, I will come and see it when I'm in Edinburgh.
Please do.
Yeah, it sounds brilliant. And then, do you have, once it's been on in Edinburgh, do you have any plans to tour Autopilot? Maybe to show it in other. Well, surely you could get it in at the Nottingham Playhouse. You've got connections there, haven't you?
I'd hope so. We'll see. I think it really depends how it goes down. And so, fingers crossed. We'd love for it to have a life after Edinburgh. We're inviting various people, as you do. We'll just have to wait and see. But fingers crossed. I hope it's not a one and done situation, but if it is, I'll be happy that it happened at all, and on to the next thing. So
yeah, and you mentioned the film as well. That sounds fantastic. So you're going to be doing that in the autumn, right?
Yeah, shooting that in probably late September. We're just firming up all the various things you've got to firm up for that to happen, but we've got some support from the BBC and from the BFI, which is really, really exciting, and working with a great director who I've never worked with before, but is also from the Midlands, Margot Rowe, and a brilliant producer. And this is the second short film I'll have made, but massively different to the first one, which was when I just finished drama school, and it was 3 minutes long, and we had much smaller budget, and so this feels like a real kind of vote of confidence from those various institutions, and a real chance to explore something a little bit more expansive. Yeah.
Brilliant. Ben, I wish you all the best with Autopilot and with the short film as well. Have you got a title for the...
Yeah, it's called Monitor.
Monitor. Oh, fantastic. It makes me think of the BBC series from the 60s, Monitor, the arts programme.
I don't know it.
Yeah, check it out. There's some
I will.
Good programmes in there. Autopilot and Monitor, and of course the Archers, if you're an Archers fan. Like my dad, he'll be tuning in as he always
Hello,
does.
Chris's dad.
He's going to love that. Ben, thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure.
Hope you've enjoyed.
Thanks for introducing me to de Beauvoir.
There's been we've had a few people walking around, some kids playing, and now everyone's left.
A very rustic church bell went off a few minutes ago. I enjoyed that.
I'll edit that out.
Oh,
maybe I could get
edit it back in, make it more prominent. This ominous bell tolling throughout. Yeah.
Well, maybe we can get the sound managers from the Archers. You give me their numbers, and they can just introduce absolutely bizarre
rural elements.
Yeah, like the lambs having their young.
Yeah.
We could have that during our conversation.
Absolutely.
Oh, is that a lamb giving birth?
Yeah. Why not?
We'll do that. Ben, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Cheers.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Park Date. There's lots more where that came from, and there'll be more in the future as well. If you enjoyed it, please leave a review, good or bad, make them funny. I'll be reading out the best ones, and there'll be a prize for the one that makes me laugh the most. Name check some trees in your reviews and leave them wherever you get your podcasts from. Check out our website, parkdate.co.uk, and if you see me walking around in the park, come and say hello. I think that was the sound of someone sneezing. Yes. Thank you. Bye-bye. Coming up on the next instalment of Park Date, I'll be joined by every single person in the entire world who will sing a jolly song together just for me. So tune in to the next episode of